Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive. You ready to get into it today?
Absolutely. Always excited to dig into something new.
Well, today we're taking a look at sustainable farming in Nigeria.
Ooh, that's a hot topic right now.
It is. It's becoming more and more important every day, and this deep dive is focused on a company called AgroGreen Dynamics Limited. They're trying to really change the agricultural landscape there.
AgroGreen Dynamics Limited. I've heard some buzz about them.
Yeah, they've got this whole approach they call the AgroGreen way, and it's all about tackling some pretty major issues head on.
Like, what kind of issues are we talking about?
Well, one of the things that really jumped out at me in their presentation was the fact that over 75% of Nigeria's soil is degraded because of chemical farming.
Wow, 75%. That's a really significant number.
It is. It's a huge problem.
Ugh.
And it kind of sets the stage for why a company like AgroGreen is getting so much attention.
Right, because if the soil is that degraded, it's going to impact everything from crop yields to food security to the overall economy.
Exactly. It's all connected. And their presentation really highlights that. They go into detail about all these challenges farmers are facing: low productivity, high input cost, food safety concerns, you name it.
So it's like this whole web of interconnected issues that are all stemming from this reliance on chemical-based agriculture.
Yeah, and that's what I found so interesting about their approach. They're not just trying to tweak the existing system. They're proposing a fundamental shift towards organic and regenerative practices.
Okay, so instead of just treating the symptoms, they're going after the root cause, which is the health of the soil.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's where the idea of regenerative agriculture comes in, which I think is a term a lot of people are hearing these days but might not fully understand.
Yeah, it's definitely become a bit of a buzzword, but the core concept is really simple. It's about going beyond just sustaining the soil. It's about actively working to improve its health over time.
I like that, actively working to improve its health. So how does that actually play out on a farm? What would a farmer who's using the AgroGreen way be doing differently?
Well, there are a lot of different practices that fall under the umbrella of regenerative agriculture. But some of the key ones that AgroGreen emphasizes are things like cover cropping, no-till farming, and composting.
Cover cropping, that's where you plant something like clover or alfalfa in between your main crops.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It helps to prevent soil erosion, suppress weeds, and add nutrients back into the soil.
And no-till farming, that's about minimizing the disturbance to the soil structure.
Yep. Instead of tilling or plowing the soil, you're leaving the previous crop residue on the surface, which acts as a natural mulch. It helps to retain moisture, reduce erosion, and improve soil health.
So you're basically mimicking what happens in a natural ecosystem where the soil is constantly being replenished and protected.
Precisely. And that's the whole idea behind regenerative agriculture, to work with nature's processes rather than trying to fight against them.
It makes so much sense when you put it that way. But I imagine it requires a pretty big shift in mindset for farmers who are used to conventional methods.
It definitely does. And AgroGreen seems to recognize that. They emphasize the importance of training and support for farmers who are making the transition to these new practices.
Which makes sense, because you can't just hand someone a new set of tools and expect them to know how to use them effectively. You need education and guidance to make it work.
Absolutely. And that's something AgroGreen seems to be putting a lot of emphasis on. They talk about providing workshops on farm demonstrations, personalized consultations, all sorts of resources to help farmers succeed.
Speaking of resources, one thing that really impressed me about AgroGreen's approach is their commitment to sustainability. They're not just talking about it. They've actually identified 5 key areas they're focusing on.
5 key areas.
Yeah, they list them as organic soil restoration, water conservation, eco-friendly inputs, building climate resilience, and ensuring long-term prosperity for farmers.
Wow, that's a pretty comprehensive list.
It is. It's like they're looking at sustainability from every angle. But it also makes me wonder, are those goals all equally achievable? Are there any trade-offs to consider?
That's a great question. It's important to remember that sustainability is a journey, not a destination. There will always be challenges to overcome, and sometimes you have to make tough choices.
Right. Like, for example, organic farming can sometimes be more labor-intensive, which can impact costs. So how do you balance those economic realities with the environmental goals?
That's the million-dollar question. It's about finding that sweet spot where you're doing what's best for the environment without sacrificing the economic viability of the farm.
Makes sense. So they're focused on sustainability, which is fantastic. But I'm sure most farmers are also thinking about the bottom line. Can they actually make a living using these methods?
Oh, absolutely. And that's where AgroGreen gets really specific. They actually claim that their methods can boost crop yields by up to 40% while simultaneously reducing input costs.
40%. That sounds almost too good to be true.
I know, right? It's a bold claim, and honestly, I'm a little skeptical. It would be great to see some data to back that up, maybe some comparisons across different farm types and regions.
Yeah, 40% is a big number,
Mm.
but even if it's half that, it's still a significant improvement. So how do they explain these results? What's the secret sauce?
Well, they break it down into a few key areas. One is enhancing soil health, which we've already talked about. They also emphasize the use of organic fertilizers, which provide nutrients in a slower, more sustainable way.
So it's about feeding the soil, not just the plant.
Exactly. And then they also talk about implementing precision agriculture techniques, which is all about using technology and data to optimize farming practices.
So things like soil testing, GPS-guided planting, and maybe even drones for monitoring crop health.
Yep. All of those things can help to reduce waste, improve efficiency, and ultimately lead to higher yields and lower costs.
So they're combining ancient wisdom about working with nature with cutting-edge technology. That's pretty cool.
It is. And then there's one more thing they mentioned that I found really interesting. They talk about using microbial soil activators.
Microbial soil activators. I have to admit, I'm not familiar with that one.
Yeah, it's a relatively new concept, but it's gaining a lot of attention in the world of sustainable agriculture. Basically, it involves adding beneficial microorganisms to the soil to improve its structure and nutrient availability.
So like tiny little helpers that are working beneath the surface to make the soil healthier.
Exactly. Think of them like probiotics for your soil. They help to break down organic matter, make nutrients more accessible to plants, and even suppress harmful pathogens.
So it's like creating this whole ecosystem beneath our feet that we don't even see, but it's essential for healthy plant growth.
Precisely. And it all comes back to that idea of working with nature, not against it, which is really the core principle behind the AgroGreen way.
I'm really intrigued by all of this. It's like they've thought of everything. But let's move on to another aspect of their approach that I found really fascinating. They talk about the health benefits of organic farming.
Ah, yes. So not just better for the environment, but better for the people eating the food, too.
Exactly. And that's something I'm personally really passionate about. I'm always trying to eat healthier. And the idea of reducing pesticide residues in my food is a huge motivator.
I hear you on that. I think a lot of people are becoming more aware of the potential health impacts of pesticide exposure. And there's a growing body of research suggesting that organically grown food can have higher levels of certain nutrients and antioxidants.
So it's not just about avoiding the bad stuff. It's also about getting more of the good stuff. But how does that connect back to the soil?
It's all about the interconnectedness of the system. When you have a healthy soil ecosystem with plenty of beneficial microorganisms, those nutrients are more readily available to the plants. And when the plants are healthier, the food they produce is more nutrient dense.
It's amazing to think that something as simple as the health of the soil can have such a profound impact on our own health.
It really is. And that's why AgroGreen's focus on soil restoration is so important. It's not just about boosting yields in the short term. It's about creating a foundation for long-term health and well-being.
Absolutely. So we've talked about the environmental benefits, the health benefits, but there's one more piece of the puzzle that I want to touch on before we wrap up this part of our deep dive. AgroGreen has this really interesting cooperative model that they're promoting.
Oh, yeah, the cooperative model. I was wondering when we'd get to that.
It's a pretty unique aspect of their approach, and it seems to offer a lot of advantages for farmers. They talk about things like collective bargaining power, shared resources, easier access to markets, and even investment opportunities through their AgriVision investment program.
It's a really smart strategy. Cooperatives have a long history of empowering smallholder farmers and helping them to achieve greater economic stability.
Right, because farming can be a really tough business, especially when you're facing all these external pressures. So having that network of support and shared knowledge can be invaluable.
Absolutely. And it also aligns really well with their overall philosophy of community and sustainability. It's about creating a system where everyone benefits, not just a select few.
I love that idea. So we've got this comprehensive approach that's focused on soil health, sustainable practices, farmer empowerment, and community building. It's pretty impressive.
It is. And it makes me really curious to delve deeper into the specifics of their offerings and see how they're putting all of this into practice.
Me too.
Ew.
So let's dive into the details in part 2 of our deep dive into AgroGreen Dynamics Limited. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground talking about AgroGreen's philosophy and their big picture vision for sustainable farming in Nigeria.
It's a really impressive approach, I have to say.
It is. But now I'm ready to get into the nitty-gritty, the nuts and bolts of how they're actually making this happen.
Yeah.
What are the specific products and services they're offering to farmers?
Let's dig into that. Their presentation highlights their flagship organic fertilizer, HumiK WSP. Have you had a chance to look into that at all?
I have, and it seems like it's a key component of their soil restoration strategy.
Absolutely. HumiK WSP is kind of their star player. It's a concentrated blend of humic and fulvic acids, which are these naturally occurring substances that are like magic for soil health.
I'm intrigued. But I need a bit of a refresher on humic and fulvic acids. What exactly are they, and why are they so important for the soil?
Sure, no problem. Think of humic acids as the architects of healthy soil. They create this stable structure that allows for good drainage and air circulation. So basically, they're making sure the soil can breathe.
Ah, that makes sense. Kind of like creating a good foundation for a house.
Exactly. And then you've got fulvic acids, which are like tiny little delivery trucks. They transport nutrients directly to the roots of the plants.
So it's like a tag team effort. Humic acids build the structure, and fulvic acids deliver the goods.
Precisely. And together, they work wonders for improving soil fertility, water retention, and overall plant health.
I'm starting to see why they're so excited about this HumiK WSP. Seems like a pretty powerful tool for soil restoration.
It is, but it's not the only tool in their arsenal. They also offer a whole suite of soil restoration services that go beyond just providing the fertilizer.
What kind of services are we talking about?
Well, for starters, they offer comprehensive soil testing to assess the specific needs of each farm. Because as you know, every farm is different, and there's no one-size-fits-all solution when it comes to soil health.
Right, so it's about getting a clear picture of what's going on beneath the surface before you start making any recommendations.
Exactly. And based on the soil test results, they develop a customized restoration plan for each farmer, outlining specific steps and practices that are tailored to their unique situation.
So it's like a personalized prescription for soil health.
That's a great way to put it. And they don't just hand over the plan and say good luck. They also provide hands-on assistance with implementation. They'll actually come out to the farm and work with the farmer to make sure they're using the right techniques and getting the most out of their soil restoration efforts.
Now, that's impressive. It's a really holistic and hands-on approach.
Yeah.
It sounds like they're truly invested in the success of their farmers.
They are, and that's what sets them apart from a lot of other companies in this space. They're not just selling a product, they're building relationships and providing ongoing support.
It's like they're saying, we're not just here to sell you something, we're here to help you transform your farm and your livelihood.
Exactly. And it's not just about soil health either. They also have this really interesting program called Agro-Equip Advantage, which is all about helping farmers access modern farming equipment.
Oh, yeah. I remember reading about that in their presentation.
Yeah.
Why is access to modern equipment so important?
Well, think about it. A lot of smallholder farmers in Nigeria are still using very basic tools and techniques, which can be incredibly labor-intensive and inefficient.
Right. They might be using hand tools or animal-drawn plows instead of tractors and other modern machinery.
Exactly. And that can really limit their productivity and their profitability. But modern equipment is expensive, and a lot of farmers simply can't afford to invest in it on their own.
So AgroGreen is stepping in to help bridge that gap.
That's right. Through the Agro-Equip Advantage program, they provide farmers with access to a range of modern equipment, including tractors, harvesters, irrigation systems, and even drones for crop monitoring.
Drones, that's pretty high tech.
It is, and it's a great example of how they're combining traditional knowledge with cutting-edge technology to create a more efficient and sustainable farming system.
I'm really impressed with the breadth of their offerings. It's clear that they've put a lot of thought into addressing the challenges that farmers are facing, from the soil itself to the tools they're using.
They've got this really comprehensive approach that takes into account all the different factors that contribute to a successful farm.
It's like they're saying, we're here to support you every step of the way.
Yeah.
But of course, anyone can make promises. What I'm really interested in is whether they can actually deliver on those promises.
That's the million-dollar question. And it's one we'll explore further in part 3 of our deep dive when we take a closer look at their success stories and the impact they're having on the ground.
All right, so we've dug deep into AgroGreen's approach and their offerings. It's clear they're not messing around. They're tackling this head on. But I have to ask, what about the bigger picture? We're all worried about climate change and a looming food crisis. Can a model like AgroGreen's really make a difference on a global scale?
I think it's a crucial question and, frankly, a really exciting one to consider. What AgroGreen's doing in Nigeria is like a test case for a more sustainable future of agriculture. If they can demonstrate success at scale, it could have ripple effects far beyond their immediate region.
That's what I'm hoping to uncover here. They're proving that you can increase food production while simultaneously regenerating the environment. And that's the holy grail right now. producing more food without destroying the planet in the process.
Exactly. And one of the key pieces of that puzzle is reducing the environmental footprint of agriculture itself. Did you know that industrial agriculture is a massive contributor to greenhouse gas emissions?
I did. But I think a lot of people don't realize how big of a role agriculture plays in climate change.
It's significant. Think about it. Conventional agriculture relies heavily on synthetic fertilizers, which release nitrous oxide, a really potent greenhouse gas. Then you've got emissions from all the heavy machinery and transportation involved in industrial farming, not to mention the deforestation that often accompanies the expansion of agricultural land.
It's this whole cascade of negative environmental impacts. But AgroGreen's model seems to be doing the opposite. They're focusing on building healthy soil, which actually sequesters carbon from the atmosphere. And they're minimizing chemical inputs and promoting biodiversity.
Precisely. And that focus on biodiversity is so important. It creates more resilient ecosystems that are better equipped to handle the challenges of climate change.
It's like they're saying, hey, nature knows what it's doing, let's work with it instead of trying to control it.
Right. And that's a much more sustainable approach in the long run.
I'm convinced, but I have to admit, sometimes the scale of the climate crisis just feels overwhelming. It's easy to feel like individual actions don't really matter.
I get that. It's a huge problem, and it can definitely feel daunting. But I think AgroGreen's story is a really important reminder that solutions exist and that innovation is happening. They're proving that we can find ways to feed the world without destroying the planet.
It's inspiring to see that someone's actually doing it, not just talking about it.
Exactly. They're walking the walk. And their success is a testament to the power of ingenuity and determination.
It makes you wonder, though, if this model is so beneficial, why isn't it already the norm in agriculture? What are the barriers to widespread adoption?
Well, there are a lot of entrenched interests in the current industrial agriculture system. It's a powerful industry with a lot of money and influence.
Right, so there's a lot of resistance to change.
There is. And there's also a need for systemic change. Government policies, infrastructure, and consumer demand all need to align to support a shift towards sustainable agriculture.
It's a reminder that this is a complex issue with no easy solutions. But it's encouraging to see companies like AgroGreen leading the way and showing that a different path is possible.
Absolutely. They're pioneers. And their success is creating a ripple effect, inspiring other companies and organizations to follow suit.
It's like that old saying, be the change you want to see in the world.
Exactly. AgroGreen is living proof that change is possible and that sustainable agriculture can be a win-win for both people and the planet.
Well said. So as we wrap up this deep dive into AgroGreen Dynamics Limited, I'm left feeling a mix of hope and inspiration.
I feel the same way. They're doing incredible work, and I'm excited to see what the future holds for them and for the sustainable agriculture movement as a whole.
I'm curious, though, what do you think is the most important takeaway for our listeners from this deep dive?
That's a good question. I think the most important takeaway is that we all have a role to play in creating a more sustainable future for food. Whether it's through the choices we make as consumers, the policies we support, or the businesses we choose to invest in.
It's about recognizing that our actions have consequences and that we have the power to make a difference.
Exactly. And AgroGreen's story is a perfect example of that. They're showing us that change is possible, that innovation can lead to real solutions, and that we can build a better future for food and for the planet if we work together.
So to our listeners out there, keep learning, keep questioning, and most importantly, keep taking action, because the future of food is in our hands.
Well said. Thanks for guiding us through this fascinating deep dive. It's been a pleasure.
The pleasure was all mine. And to all of you tuning in, thank you for joining us on this journey of discovery. We'll see you next time for another deep dive.